So there are a lot of different learning styles out there, but there are three basic ones. It's auditory, visual, and then kinesthetic, which is like physical movement. So you want to get an idea of a basic learning style of a student. With what you're going to do, it's not going to be that you have to know all the different varieties, but you want to have an idea of what those basic learning styles are. The best way to do that is to make personal connections with the kids, like get to know them a little bit, make those connections, and then ask good questions. Like, for example, if a teacher gives a direction, gives like auditory directions, then ask the kid, do you understand what she said? Did you get that? Because if they don't, then there's a good idea that it's possibly that they have a different learning style. A really effective teacher is going to have directions like on the board, so it's a visual direction. They're going to demonstrate it, so it's more of a physical direction, and then they're going to also say it, so it's more auditory, and then they're going to give people a chance to practice. So an effective teacher is going to make sure that all those learning styles are being approached, but for you to know what their learning style is, you just have to ask good questions and then build that connection. To get them to start working their assignments, the real thing, again, is to make that connection. As a volunteer, it's making those connections are huge. So if this was me, what I would do is I would start to ask them questions like, is there something that's keeping you from getting started? Do you need help? Do you understand the questions? But one really good strategy is the I do, we do, you do strategy. So if they're having a hard time getting started, like let's say it's a math lesson. If they're having a hard time getting started, the first thing I would do is say, hey, let me do this one for you. Let me show you how it's done, and then we can practice it together. It's guided practice where we do it together, and now it's your turn. So it might be that they don't know how to do it and they need that to kind of jumpstart it. It might be that they just don't really want to get going. But when they see that you're making that effort and you're building that connection with them, and it holds them a little bit more accountable to get started too. So usually getting involved and getting, and do that I do, we do, you do strategy will help them get started. The big thing to do when they don't get the concept is to scaffold it. So you want to start with something that they do understand. So if you're talking about a concept that they don't get, you find out what they do get. You start to break it down into smaller chunks and find out what they get, and then start building off those parts that they do get. Like, so for example, if a student, let's go back to math. If a student is learning decimals and they have no clue what they're doing with the decimals, then break it down into money. Do you understand like how nickels and quarters and dimes works and things like that? So once they get some relevance to what they're doing and it's broken down into chunks that they understand, then you can do some simple steps to scaffold it and kind of build that concept with them. Students walk in with all kinds of different experiences and skill levels, and so you'll often have to scaffold things, and you'll often have to break it down into smaller chunks or to smaller steps for them to get it. So this is a really good question, because as teachers, we tend to teach things one way, and oftentimes we teach the way that we learn the best. And so, for example, I'm an auditory learner, and so I could sit and listen to a lecture for an hour and get a lot out of it. But most people and most kids don't learn that way. So the big thing is differentiated instruction. You want to make sure that you're trying a variety of different ways of doing things. And we know the whole definition of insanity is you're doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. So if a kid's not getting it, you teach it a different way. And that's the big thing, is try something different, try a different method, try a different way of explaining it, and that will help a lot. The big thing is the awareness of that, because you'll get kids, it's hard when you don't know a kid, you don't know the reason for whatever it is, whether it's a behavior, whether it's reluctant to work, whatever it may be. If you don't know them, then you don't know what's stemming from it. So a big piece of it is getting to know them, understanding that trauma has occurred, and then it's being patient. It's being patient with students. And there's a little saying that's be kind, or don't be nice, be kind. And what that means is you don't take a kid who's been through trauma and then lower the bar for them. You don't say, well, don't do this assignment, or it's okay that you're behaving this way, or whatever it is. You have kindness, you have empathy, you understand their situation, but they still have to be expected to perform as students and as people. If they feel like they've got like this crutch or an excuse to not do the things that are going to help them be successful, then they'll start to lean on that crutch. Another thing I've heard somewhere is kids who need the most love show it in the most unloving of ways. So again, the more patient and empathetic we are and understanding of that, because sometimes it's easy to just kind of classify a kid as, okay, that kid's just a difficult child. And it doesn't necessarily have to be that. Oftentimes it's that they've been through something, and the more empathy and understanding you have, the better. So again, it's not that you want to let them get away with stuff, but understanding where they're coming from helps you in your approach.